Hey guys, welcome back to Daska Discusses. Well, I finally got to watch The Irishman. Yep, took a while, but finally it was done. And here is my review on it. So let's do this. Now, The Irishman, what can you say? I'm a big Scorsese fan, and I was waiting for this for a long time. It was in my top 10 most anticipated films of 2018 list, so I was pretty pumped to see it. It did take me a couple of attempts to watch it, but I managed to sit down and watch the whole thing in one go. And I'll tell you what, well, how are you going to put this? Well, firstly, what does IMDb say what the plot is? Because a lot of people are getting a bit confused as to what's going on in the film. IMDb, a mob hitman recalls his possible involvement with the slaying of Jimmy Hoffa. Now, Robert Deniro stars as Frank Sheeran, Al Pacino, Jimmy Hoffa, Joe Pesci as Russell Buffalino, and you've got a few other sub-characters like Harvey Keitel playing Angelo Bruno, Ray Romano, Bill Buffalino as well, and then a few other ones. Anna Paquin's interesting. She plays a daughter of Robert De Niro. And what I really liked was Stephen Graham, who is the guy from Snatch. I don't know if you remember. What can I say about The Irishman? After waiting a long time for this to come out, sat down and, well, I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but it does have that same formula of a Scorsese film, which is, you know, about the mob, about the mafia, following someone in the progression through that. De Niro plays a really good role in it. I found that, you know, I always had an idea who Jimmy Hoffa was from other films, but I didn't actually know what he was, like what kind of role he played in American politics or American culture. And this film really did, it answered a lot of those questions for me, right? So that was very interesting as well. But what I found was the story follows the kind of narrative progression of De Niro, his character Frank Sheeran, telling the story about how he came about to be part of the mob and how he became the Irishman, you could say, and then how he meets Jimmy Hoffa and all the stuff with the unions. And look, I must say the first hour of the film, I remember when there's one scene where, I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's one scene when they walk into like a restaurant and Frank meets a few mob bosses, a few mob guys there, and you know, they sit down and there's this like whole dialogue between him, Joe Pesci as well, and it did feel like, really did feel like a Scorsese film at that point. I'm like, yep, getting these glimpses of like Goodfellas, Casino, it's really, really good, right? And then Al Pacino comes into the story, the Jimmy Hoffa character comes in, which again, the story doesn't slow down a bit, but it's interesting to see how Al Pacino acts. Now, what I think the problem I had with it was, you know, and a lot of people are whinging about the running time. It went fairly okay for me, but what I found the biggest gripe for me was that whole thing about, you know, you've got De Niro, Pesci, Keitel, just is not in it too much, but De Niro per se, like he's in it as well. Obviously for a lot of the film, he's the protagonist. But what I found really distracting was the whole de-aging of the actors in it. Now, I know this was part of it. I know this was part of what Scorsese wanted to do, make them look younger. And some of the characters, they looked really good. They looked younger and they looked okay. But there was some points where, with Robert De Niro's character especially his eyes, it just looked a bit too, not freaky for me, but it just looked a bit too fake, if that makes sense. Now, you remember Rogue One when they did with Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, they made her look younger as well. And Peter Cushing in Rogue One, they did that as well, and it looked okay. The Irishman looks a lot better the way they've done that in terms of de-aging the actors, right? But there was some points in the film where I was a bit distracted and I was like, wow, his eyes look really weird here. And it kind of fell down, was about, I don't know, about an hour into the film. Now, a lot of people on the net are saying the same kind of thing, was when De Niro, you know, finds that his daughter's being, you know, pushed around by the local grocer, and he goes down there to fix him up, so to speak, you know, have a word with him, and he gets into a bit of a fight where he beats this guy up, and it looked really fake in terms of, it looked like, unfortunately, it looked like an old man trying to play, who looked, wait, we know De Niro is an old man, he's de-aged, but it was like a young guy trying to bash up this guy, but another guy, the grocer, but it looked really bad, as if it was an old man there with makeup on playing a young man. So it was confusing, it was also distracting, and at that point I'm like, that really didn't look good. Now, as the movie goes on, there's some real killer scenes with killer dialogue, great cinematography, great soundtrack, not as good as other soundtracks to other Scorsese films, but there's some great cinematography, right? You know, that typical kind of dollying shot, that typical kind of like, that steady cam shot going through the hallways. There's a lot of key iconic shots that Scorsese does that they're replicated in this, and it's like, yep, I'm watching a Scorsese film. What I found distracting other times was some of the editing was a bit funny. Now, I actually checked my buffering on my Netflix if it was an issue, but it wasn't, where you've got two characters having a discussion, and just before, it was either just before or just after the dialogue's cut off, it kind of, Scorsese decides to change his viewpoint going from the other one. It's like a normal shot, reverse shot, which is like, you're having a conversation, you're shooting someone, and you got someone on left of screen, and then it cuts to them on the right of screen. What Scorsese was doing at some points was, not only was the audio editing off at times with that, but I found that a couple times he changed, you know, the 180-degree rule. You can look that up, what that means. Now, if I'm wrong, hey, sue me, whatever, look it up. But I felt that at times it was jarring in terms of where the camera was at one point, and then it completely shifts. It breaks that 180-degree rule that you have in film that I teach my students as well. Whatever, maybe it wasn't there, maybe it was there, but it was just some points where I felt that it just didn't really feel like it was flowing, some scenes, okay? Now, there are some really good scenes, and you know, there's one in particular with Pacino about a certain meeting that he has to have, and this guy rocks up late. I'm not going to spoil it, so again, this is a no spoiler review. Rocks up late and they have this big discussion. There's some really good dialogue scenes in that, and they're pretty funny as well. It's reminiscent of some Tarantino films as well, but here's the thing. Who's copying who here? Is it Tarantino copying Scorsese? They've both got their own individual styles, but there were some dialogue scenes that I felt had this kind of Tarantino-esque type of feel to it. But at the same time, having Deniro, Pacino, Keitel, Joe Pesci in the same scenes, it was a Scorsese film. It definitely was. Now, I think who stole the show for me was definitely Joe Pesci, who played a key character in it. I'm not going to give away what type of role he played, but he played like a mob figure, a kind of big mob figure, where he was completely opposite to what he was in Casino and Goodfellas, where he wasn't, you know, crazy off the hook kind of character. He was more of a calm character. He wears these glasses, very quietly spoken. I thought Joe Pesci really did well in this. And if anything, if this film's up for Oscars, which apparently it is, and Golden Globes, I will definitely go with Pesci. Definitely deserves a supporting Oscar nomination for this, definitely. Pacino as well. Hey, maybe if they are both nominated, they both really deserve it. Pacino does a great role. He plays the kind of like, you know, Jimmy Hoffa role where he's really animated. Not so much, not like a Tony Montana style kind of animation with his acting, but he plays a really good role. They both deserve a nomination. I reckon Pesci deserves to win it, if anything. Deniro's portrayal is fantastic as well. Not up there with Pesci and Pacino. I just felt that at times, I understand his character is quite quietly spoken as well, and he's like the main mob hitman, you could say. It's his story. He's telling us what happened during this time. I think it was the whole de-aging thing that just took it away from me with him. His eyes and the way he moved, it really took it away. So it's a shame, because he is a brilliant actor and his acting skills were fantastic, but I couldn't get past that with De Niro. Everything about it just worked well. It is a Scorsese film, cinematography, acting, music, everything all there worked well. The storyline went really well. I wasn't bored up at any points. A lot of people saying it was boring. It wasn't boring because this is a Scorsese film. It's meant to be a slow burn, and that's what it was, right? The issues I had with it were the whole thing about the de-aging. I know I'm going to keep going on about it. That was a problem too. There was also the whole last act of the film, the last, say, 30 to 40 minutes. Not saying it was rushed, but maybe the last 15, 20, how Scorsese ties up all the loose ends. I felt that was really rushed, and how certain characters, again, I can't spoil anything, how certain characters were established throughout the whole film. You're going all through all that to get to this last ending, and then this kind of happens, and it kind of like ties it up pretty quick, and then bang, credits. I'm like, okay. It is a completely different ending to what you'd get in something like Casino and Goodfellas. So that was my little gripe with it, right? It was not the most satisfying kind of ending that you would have had with his other films. Hey, it is a different film. I'm not here to talk about how good Casino and Goodfellas are. I'm not here to talk about The Irishman. But when you've got something like this, where everyone's been pumped for it and really waiting for it, then you're gonna think, okay, well, how does it compare? I'm not comparing at all, right? But, you know, everyone's like, oh, you should have waited till you watch The Irishman to do your top 10 Scorsese films. Well, I can't put something in a top 10 list until you've watched it many times, right? You can't just put this in there. But if you had to, if I had to look back at my Scorsese top 10 list, which I have, and after talking to a lot of friends, I feel bad putting Color of Money in and not King of Comedy. And in terms of The Irishman, it would be in the top 10, but what am I going to take out? Definitely none of my top 5. And, you know, it's too difficult. Maybe, you know, Cape Fear is great. Gangs of New York is great. No, I'm not going to even talk about where this would be. So, in terms of The Irishman, I've talked about all my good points, talked about the gripes I had with it. The de-aging was an issue. Some of the editing was a bit off with the audio editing. And the last act didn't do it for me. Now, where am I going to rate it? And what is my rating for it? Well, it is a strong story. It is a great Scorsese film. I think up there in terms of being nominated for Best Picture. It's going to be hard to beat, but if anything was to beat it, I haven't seen 1914, but I'll tell you what, Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, you know, does it deserve Best Picture? Director, I reckon, as a shock upset, it could wind up taking out actor, picture, director, but I think Scorsese could win it for director. Best Picture is open to anyone, actor, Joaquin Phoenix for sure. But where do I go with The Irishman? Well, you've heard everything I have to say about it, and I'm going to give my rating for The Irishman a solid 8 out of 10. Yep, it is an 8 out of 10, which is great. Now, you can go back and look at my top 10 Scorsese films and see what I rated everything else. I'll give The Irishman an 8. It loses 2 marks because of the distracting de-aging at times, because of the final act, the way it's all comes together at the end, which I wasn't a huge fan of. Hey, you know. And the fact that, yeah, just some of the edits sometimes just didn't work for me. And I think it was the blatant de-aging parts just didn't do it for me. It didn't work. It took it away from some of the scenes and the last act of the film. Let me know what you guys thought of The Irishman. Leave a comment below. If you like this video, guys, please leave a like. And if you haven't subscribed already, please hit subscribe. And you can stay up to date with all my videos. And I'll see you guys... Actually, I'll see you guys. I'm going to be doing a review straight after Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, and I'll be one of the, if not, you know, in the top 50, 100, 200, whatever reviews that night. I'm going to get out there, review it, put it on as soon as I watch it. So yeah, I'll see you guys very soon, and I'll see you guys on Daska Discusses next time. Boom.